The morning sun rose over New Portland Colony like any other day. Children laughed as they ran through the streets heading to their schools. Parents kissed them goodbye, never imagining it might be the last time. The colony had been humanity's pride, a peaceful settlement on a beautiful world with purple skies and 3 moons. Jack Hayes stood at the window of his apartment, watching his twin sons Kyle and Lucas board the school transport. They were 9 years old, bright and curious about everything. His wife had died 3 years ago, and the boys were all he had left. He smiled as Lucas turned and waved at him one last time before disappearing into the transport. Jack was a commander in the Human Defense Fleet. He had spent 20 years protecting Earth's colonies from pirates and natural disasters. Life had been good lately. The Zarketh Collective had made contact with humanity 5 years ago, and they seemed friendly. They shared technology, opened trade routes, and invited human children to cultural exchange programs. The galaxy finally seemed like a safe place, but Jack Hayes was wrong. The galaxy was not safe at all. At exactly 10 in the morning, across 12 human colonies, the sky turned dark. Massive Zarketh ships appeared without warning. They were not the trading vessels humanity had grown used to seeing. These were military craft, cold and efficient. They descended on schools, playgrounds, and residential areas. Jack was in a command meeting when the alarm started screaming. He ran to the operations center and saw the display showing chaos across the colony. Zarketh soldiers were on the ground, moving with frightening speed. They were not attacking adults. They were taking children. Jack's heart stopped. His sons. He grabbed his weapon and ran for the transport station where Kyle and Lucas had been heading. The streets were filled with panicking people. Parents screamed for their kids. Defense forces tried to fight back, but the Zarketh had planned everything perfectly. Their shields absorbed human weapons fire. Their soldiers moved like machines, stunning any adult who got in their way. When Jack reached the school, it was too late. The building stood empty. Transport ships were already lifting off, filled with crying children. He saw Kyle and Lucas in one of the ships through a window, pressed against the glass, reaching for him. Jack fired his weapon at the ship, but it did nothing. The transport accelerated and vanished into the sky. Jack fell to his knees. Around him, hundreds of other parents were doing the same thing. They had failed. They had trusted the wrong people. Across human space, the scene repeated. On Earth itself, a school field trip to the European History Museum ended in horror when Zarketh soldiers materialized and took every child. 40,000 children disappeared in less than 2 hours. It was the most coordinated attack humanity had ever experienced, and they never saw it coming. Dr. Linda Morrison had been part of the first contact team that met the Zarketh. She was a scientist who studied alien life, and she had believed the Zarketh when they spoke of peace and cooperation. When news of the abductions reached her laboratory on Mars, she felt sick. She had helped negotiate the treaties that allowed Zarketh access to human worlds. This was partially her fault. Linda immediately started analyzing the treaties, looking for any clue about why this happened. What she found made everything worse. Hidden in complex legal language were clauses about unascended beings and educational appropriation. The Zarketh had the legal right, according to ancient galactic law, to take children from newer species. Humanity had signed away their rights without understanding what they were agreeing to. She sent her findings to Admiral Kate Sullivan, the highest-ranking officer in human space. Kate was a tough woman who had served in the military for 40 years. She was also a grandmother. Her granddaughter Emma had been taken from a school on Europa. When Kate read Linda's report, her face turned to stone. Kate called an emergency session of Earth's unified government. Leaders from every nation gathered to hear what she had to say. The room was filled with grief and rage. Some leaders wanted to negotiate. Others wanted immediate war. Kate listened to all of them, then stood and spoke. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of command. She explained what the treaties said. She explained that the galactic community expected humanity to accept this loss. She explained that hundreds of other species had lost their children the same way over thousands of years. The Zarketh saw it as their right. The galaxy saw it as normal. Then Kate said something that changed everything. She looked directly at the cameras broadcasting to all of humanity and said this. They think we will forget. They think we will move on. They think we are like the other species who bent their heads and accepted this. But they are wrong. We are not like anyone else in this galaxy. Those are our children, and we are bringing them home. I don't care if we have to burn down their entire empire to do it. We are bringing our children home." The room erupted in agreement. Every leader voted yes. Humanity would go to war. Marcus Webb was a cargo pilot who transported supplies between Earth and the outer colonies. He was not a soldier, just a regular man trying to make a living. His daughter Claire was 12 years old. She had been on that field trip to the European History Museum. Marcus had been in orbit, loading cargo when the abductions happened. By the time he landed, Claire was gone. Marcus did not have the power to command fleets or make treaties. But he had a ship and he had determination. While humanity prepared for war, Marcus made his own plans. He knew people in the smuggling trade. He knew routes that bypassed official channels. He could get into Zarketh space when no one else could. He volunteered for a mission that seemed impossible. Human intelligence needed information about where the children were being held and what defenses the Zarketh had. Someone had to go deep into enemy territory and gather that data. Marcus said he would do it. Back on New Portland, Jack Hayes had not spoken for 3 days after losing his sons. Other parents had broken down completely, but Jack was military. He channeled his grief into something else, preparation. He studied every piece of information about the Zarketh. He analyzed their ships, their weapons, their tactics. He found something interesting. The Zarketh were powerful, but they were also comfortable. They had not fought a real war in 800 years. Jack presented his findings to Admiral Kate Sullivan. The Zarketh expected fear and submission. They expected other species to fight like they did, with rigid formations and predictable tactics. Humanity could use that. Humans could be unpredictable. Humans could adapt. Humans could bring a level of creative violence that the Zarketh had never encountered. Kate promoted Jack to a planning position in the new war effort. Every shipyard in human space began working around the clock. Earth, Mars, the Moon. Every orbital station started building warships. But these were not defensive vessels. These were ships designed to attack, to overwhelm, to destroy. The flagship would be called the Retribution. It would be 3 kilometers long, the largest vessel humanity had ever built. It would carry weapons that pushed the limits of physics. It would carry thousands of soldiers. And it would carry humanity's message to the Zarketh. You took our children, and now you will pay. Linda Morrison joined a secret project to hack into Zarketh communication networks. Humanity had one advantage the aliens did not expect. Humans were incredibly good with computers and cyber warfare. The Zarketh technology was more advanced, but it was also old and stable. They had not updated their security in centuries because no one had ever successfully attacked them digitally. Linda's team spent months breaking through their systems. When they finally got inside, they found exactly what they needed. The Zarketh were keeping records of every child they had taken. The children were scattered across 17 different worlds. Some were in what the Zarketh called education center, which were really just labor camps. Others were in research facilities. The worst were being kept as personal servants and trophies by wealthy Zarketh families. The data was sent to Kate Sullivan. Now humanity knew where to strike. Humanity also reached out to the Galactic Council, the organization that supposedly governed relations between species. Surely they would help stop this injustice. Human diplomats presented evidence of what the Zarketh had done. They showed images of crying parents. They played recordings of children being dragged onto ships. The Galactic Council listened. Then they voted. By a massive majority, they refused to help humanity. The council representative, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light, explained in a flat voice that the Zarketh had followed all laws. Humanity's children were legally classified as available for appropriation. This was how things had always been done. Humanity should accept reality and move forward. The human diplomats left the council chambers in shock. They reported back to Earth. Kate Sullivan read their message and made a decision. Humanity would send one final communication to the Zarketh and to the galaxy. She recorded it herself. To the Zarketh Collective and to all who hear this message, you have taken our children. You say this is legal. You say this is tradition. You expect us to accept this and forget. We have one response. You have 30 days to return every human child alive and unharmed. If you do not... The Zarketh fleet moved confidently through the solar system. Their admiral, a being named Vector, had crushed 3 rebellions in his career. He expected this to be simple. Humans were emotional and weak. They would see his ships and give up immediately. He ordered his fleet into a standard attack formation, the same formation the Zarketh had used for 1,000 years. Behind Saturn's largest moon, Kate Sullivan watched the enemy fleet on her screens. She had 200 human ships hidden throughout the system. Mines floated in dark space. Weapons platforms sat dormant on moons and asteroids. Everything was ready. She let the Zarketh come deeper into the system, closer to their trap. Jack Hayes sat in the cockpit of his fighter, surrounded by 40 other pilots. They were hidden in Saturn's rings, their ships powered down to avoid detection. Jack's hands were steady on the controls. He thought about Kyle and Lucas. They were out there somewhere, scared and alone. He would get them back. But first he had to survive this battle. Kate gave the signal. Every human ship powered up at once. Every mine activated. Every weapon platform came online. The Zarketh suddenly found themselves surrounded. Before they could react, the first wave of missiles hit them. 20 Zarketh ships exploded in the opening seconds. Vector screamed orders to his crew. This was not supposed to happen. How had the humans hidden so much firepower? His shields were strong, but the human weapons hit harder than expected. He tried to reform his fleet, but human ships were everywhere, attacking from all directions. There was no pattern, no predictable movement. It was chaos. Jack Hayes led his fighter squadron straight into the heart of the Zarketh formation. Human fighters were small and fast. They dodged between the massive alien warships, firing at weak points. Jack targeted the engines and sensor arrays. Each ship he crippled was one less threat to his people. The Retribution emerged from behind Saturn's moon like a rising mountain. Its rail cannons fired with devastating accuracy. Each shot punched through Zarketh shields and tore ships apart. The alien admiral had never seen weapons like these. Human technology was supposed to be inferior, but these weapons were destroying his fleet. What Vector did not know was that humans learned fast. Very fast. Over the past months, Linda Morrison and her team had reverse-engineered every piece of Zarketh technology they could find. They took alien designs and improved them. They added innovations the Zarketh had never considered. The result was weapons that matched or exceeded anything the aliens had. But technology was not humanity's only advantage. Kate Sullivan had studied military history going back thousands of years. She knew that rigid tactics failed against creative opponents, so she gave her commanders freedom to adapt and improvise. Every captain could make their own decisions. Every squadron could adjust their strategy in real time. The Zarketh fought like a machine. Humans fought like water, flowing around obstacles and finding every weakness. Linda Morrison was aboard the Retribution, working with a cyber warfare team. While the battle raged outside, she was fighting a different war inside the Zarketh computer networks. Human hackers had infiltrated their communication systems. They sent false orders to Zarketh ships. They created confusion in their command structure. Half the alien fleet was getting orders to retreat, while the other half was told to advance. The result was complete chaos. 6 hours into the battle, Vector realized he was going to lose. He had started with 200 ships. Now he had less than 50, and they were scattered and damaged. His own flagship was on fire. He gave the order to retreat, but by then it was too late. Human ships pursued the fleeing Zarketh vessels, destroying most of them before they could escape. Only 7 Zarketh ships made it out of the solar system. Vector was not among the survivors. His flagship exploded when the Retribution's main cannon hit its reactor. Kate Sullivan watched it burn and felt no satisfaction. This was just the beginning. The Battle of Saturn was broadcast across the galaxy. Every species watched in shock as humanity destroyed a Zarketh fleet. This was not supposed to be possible. Young species did not win against the great powers. Young species submitted and obeyed. But humans had just shattered that assumption. The surviving Zarketh ships brought news back to their High Council. The council members were furious and frightened. They had never lost so badly. They immediately sent messages to all their subject species, demanding they prepare for war against humanity. Most species obeyed out of fear, but some hesitated, and a few quietly refused. The Torvan were an insectoid race that looked like giant mantises. They had been under Zarketh control for 300 years. The Zarketh took their resources and limited their technology. The Torvan had dreamed of freedom but never had the strength to fight back. Until now. A Torvan merchant named Kliktar approached human diplomats with an offer. His people would provide intelligence about Zarketh systems and supply routes. They would offer safe harbors for human ships. In exchange, when humanity won, they wanted their freedom. Kate Sullivan accepted immediately. Humanity had its first alien allies. With the solar system secure, Kate ordered the next phase. The human expeditionary fleet would split into multiple strike groups. Each group would target one of the 17 worlds holding human children. The attacks would happen simultaneously, spreading the Zarketh forces thin. Jack Hayes was given command of Strike Group Alpha. His target was a planet called Corvus Prime, an administrative world where the Zarketh kept what they called education centers. Intelligence suggested there were 3,000 human children on that world. Jack's sons were among them. Marcus Webb, now wearing a military uniform, was assigned to Strike Group Beta. His target was a mining world called Ashkar. The children there were being used as labor. Marcus had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the mission, leading the ground team that would actually rescue the children. His daughter Claire was on Ashkar. He would bring her home or die trying. Linda Morrison joined Strike Group Delta, which was targeting a research station in deep space. The Zarketh had been conducting experiments on human children there, trying to understand what made humans so adaptable. Linda wanted to see those researchers face justice for what they had done. The strike groups launched. Each group jumped through space using newly installed Zarketh-style drives that humans had improved. The journey to the target worlds took 3 days. During that time, the crews prepared. Soldiers checked their weapons. Pilots ran simulations. Medical teams prepared to treat traumatized children. Jack could not sleep during the journey. He kept watching videos of Kyle and Lucas, recordings from before the abduction. He remembered teaching them to ride bikes. He remembered their laughter. He remembered promising to always protect them. He had failed that promise, but he would make it right. Strike Group Alpha arrived at Corvus Prime and immediately encountered resistance. The Zarketh had fortified the planet after the Battle of Saturn. Defense platforms opened fire as soon as the human ships appeared. But Jack had expected this. His ships moved in coordinated patterns, drawing fire while strike fighters took out the platforms one by one. The space battle lasted 4 hours. Jack lost 3 ships and 42 crew members. But eventually the orbital defenses fell silent. The path to the surface was clear. Jack led the first wave of dropships down through the atmosphere. The education center was actually a prison. High walls surrounded massive buildings where children were kept in cells and forced to learn Zarketh language and customs. Guards patrolled with shock weapons. The Zarketh believed they were civilizing these young humans, teaching them to be useful servants. Jack's dropship landed hard outside the main gate. Human soldiers poured out, weapons ready. The Zarketh guards tried to stop them but were completely unprepared for the ferocity of the attack. These were not soldiers fighting for orders. These were parents fighting for their children. The difference was everything. Jack led his team through the complex, checking every room. They found children locked in small cells, wearing gray uniforms, looking thin and scared. The soldiers broke down every door, gathering the children. Many kids were too frightened to move at first. They had been told humans had abandoned them. They did not believe rescue was possible. Then Jack entered a room and saw Kyle and Lucas. His sons were thinner than he remembered, their eyes haunted by what they had experienced. For a moment everyone froze. Then Lucas whispered, "Dad?" and ran forward. Jack caught both boys in his arms and held them like he would never let go. Around him, other soldiers were reuniting with their own children. Grown men and women wept openly, but there was no time for a proper reunion. They still needed to evacuate thousands of children. Jack forced himself to release his sons and keep moving. He promised them they would talk later. Right now, they needed to get everyone to the ships. At Ashkar, Marcus Webb's mission was going differently. The mining complex was built into the side of a mountain. Children were forced to work in the tunnels extracting valuable minerals. The Zarketh overseers used shock collars to control them. When Marcus's team breached the complex, they saw children as young as 5 years old carrying heavy buckets of ore. Marcus felt rage like he had never known. His team moved through the 6 months had passed since the first rescue operations. Humanity had freed 30,000 children, but 10,000 were still out there. The war had settled into a grinding struggle. Every day brought new battles, new losses, new grief. Jack Hayes stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at reports from the latest engagement. They had tried to rescue children from a world called Teknor, but the Zarketh had been ready this time. Human forces lost 2 ships and failed to reach the children. Jack felt the weight of that failure. Somewhere down on that planet, kids were still suffering and he could not save them. The Zarketh had learned from their early defeats. They no longer fought in predictable patterns. They fortified the worlds holding children, using them as shields. They knew humans would hesitate to attack if it meant risking the kids' lives. It was a cruel but effective strategy. Kate Sullivan called a meeting of all senior commanders. The war was not going well. Humanity had won the early battles through surprise and innovation. But now the Zarketh were adapting and they had far more resources. For every ship humanity built, the Zarketh could build 10. For every soldier humanity trained, they had 100. The admirals and generals argued about what to do next. Some wanted to negotiate, trade something valuable for the remaining children. Others wanted to launch desperate attacks, accept heavy losses to save the kids. Kate listened to everyone, but she had no good answers. Every option led to more death. Linda Morrison was working in her laboratory analyzing captured Zarketh technology. She was exhausted. The war effort demanded constant innovation. Every time humans developed a new tactic or weapon, the Zarketh found a counter. It felt like fighting against an ocean. No matter how hard you pushed, the water just flowed around you. But Linda kept working because she still felt guilty. She had helped negotiate the treaties that allowed this nightmare to happen. She would not rest until every child was home. Late one night, while examining a Zarketh control system, Linda noticed something strange. There was a signal being sent to a specific frequency, a signal that did nothing useful for the device. She traced the signal and found it connected to a network she had not seen before. A network that touched every piece of major Zarketh technology across their empire. Linda spent 3 days barely sleeping, following that network. What she discovered changed everything. The Zarketh's power was not just military. Hidden across their territory were ancient stations, thousands of years old, that emitted a specific type of radiation. This radiation affected the brains of most species, making them less aggressive, less creative, less likely to rebel. It was subtle, taking years to fully affect a population, but over time it made species docile and easy to control. Humanity had not been exposed long enough to be affected. That was why humans could fight back when other species could not. That was why humans innovated and adapted while others stagnated. The Zarketh had been using this technology to suppress the entire galaxy. Linda took her findings to Kate Sullivan. The Admiral listened carefully, then asked the obvious question. Can we destroy these stations? Linda nodded. If we take out the central control hub, the entire network shuts down. But that hub is on the Zarketh homeworld, Throne Prime. It is the most defended location in their empire. Kate smiled grimly. Then that is where we need to go. The plan was insane. While the main fleet kept the Zarketh military busy, a small team would infiltrate Throne Prime and destroy the control hub. If they succeeded, every suppressed species in the galaxy would suddenly wake up from their mental fog. Rebellions would erupt everywhere. The Zarketh Empire would collapse from within. If they failed, the team would die and humanity would gain nothing. Kate needed volunteers. She needed people skilled in combat technology and stealth. She needed people willing to go on a mission with almost no chance of survival. When she made the announcement, 300 people volunteered immediately. Marcus Webb was one of them. After rescuing Claire from Ashkar, he had sent her back to Earth to recover. She was safe now, living with her aunt, slowly healing from her trauma. Marcus had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. He wanted to make sure no other children suffered like his daughter had. Linda Morrison volunteered as well. The mission needed someone who understood Zarketh technology. She was the obvious choice. Kate tried to talk her out of it, saying she was too valuable to risk. Linda refused to back down. She had helped start this nightmare. She would help end it. Jack Hayes wanted to volunteer, but Kate ordered him to stay with the fleet. He had his sons back, and he was needed as a military commander. Jack argued, but Kate was firm. This mission needed specialists, and Jack's skills were better used commanding ships. The final team consisted of 12 humans and 3 Torvan guides. The Torvan had been to Throne Prime before as slaves, and knew secret routes through the city. They also had personal reasons for wanting to strike at the heart of the Zarketh Empire. The team took a captured Zarketh cargo ship, modified to hide their life signs. They traveled for 2 weeks, using back routes provided by the Torvin. Several times they passed Zarketh patrols, but the stolen identification codes held. No one suspected a cargo ship of carrying an infiltration team. Throne Prime was beautiful in a cold way. Massive towers of crystal and metal reached into the purple sky. Floating platforms carried wealthy Zarketh between buildings. Everything was clean, ordered, perfect. But below the shining upper levels were the lower districts, where slave species lived in cramped quarters, working to maintain the paradise above. The team landed in a lower district cargo port. They disguised themselves as Torvin workers, which was easier than pretending to be Zarketh. The upper levels had heavy security, but the lower districts were mostly ignored. The Zarketh did not believe slaves would rebel. That was their first mistake. The Torvin guides led them through a maze of tunnels and service passages. They passed other species going about their work with dead eyes and slumped shoulders. These people had been under the suppression field for so long they barely remembered what freedom felt like. One young Torvin, barely more than a child, stopped and stared at the team. She could sense something different about them. Marcus met her eyes and saw a spark of recognition. She did not understand what humans were, but she understood they were not suppressed. They were not broken. She said nothing and let them pass. The central control hub was located beneath the Grand Assembly Hall, the seat of Zarketh government. Getting inside required passing through multiple security checkpoints. Linda had studied the security systems and found a weakness. The checkpoints scanned for weapons and explosives, but they did not scan for certain types of electronic equipment. The team could smuggle in components to build bombs inside the facility. They split into smaller groups to avoid suspicion. Marcus and Linda went together, posing as maintenance workers. They carried bags of electronic parts, claiming they were repairing communication systems. The guards barely glanced at them. After all, who would be stupid enough to attack Throne Prime? Inside the Grand Assembly Hall, they made their way to the lower levels. The control hub was enormous. A massive chamber filled with ancient technology still running after thousands of years. Energy pulsed through crystalline structures. Data flowed in streams of light. This was the heart of Zarketh power, the source of their control over the galaxy. Linda connected her portable computer to the system and started downloading data. She wanted evidence of everything the Zarketh had done, crimes spanning millennia affecting billions of lives. This would be shown to the entire galaxy. While she worked, the rest of the team planted explosives at key points throughout the hub. They used shaped charges designed to create a cascading failure. When the bombs went off, the entire network would collapse. But their presence did not go unnoticed forever. A Zarketh security officer reviewing system logs noticed unusual access patterns. He sent guards to investigate. When they found humans in the control hub, alarms screamed throughout the building. The team had minutes before armed forces would swarm their position. Linda frantically finished downloading data, while Marcus and the others set up a defensive position. When Zarketh soldiers came through the doors, they met concentrated fire. Humans were outnumbered, but they had the advantage of fighting from cover in a narrow space. The battle was brutal. 2 team members died in the first minutes. A Torvin guide was shot protecting Linda while she worked. Marcus took a hit to his shoulder but kept firing. They could not hold for long. More soldiers were coming. Linda shouted that the download was complete. Marcus yelled for everyone to fall back to the exit. They activated the first set of charges, collapsing part of the chamber behind them to slow pursuit. The explosion shook the building. Alarms grew louder. The team ran through the corridors of the Grand Assembly Hall, fighting running battles with security forces. They left charges behind them, creating chaos and blocking pursuit routes. 3 more team members fell, buying time for the others to escape. They reached the surface and split up according to the plan. Each group took a different route to the cargo port. Marcus and Linda ran through the lower districts with 2 other survivors. Behind them, the Grand Assembly. The galaxy was burning, not from human weapons but from rebellion. With the suppression field destroyed, species that had been slaves for centuries suddenly remembered what freedom meant. They rose up against their Zarketh masters with fury that had been building for generations. Kate Sullivan watched reports flooding in from across Zarketh space. On the mining world of Gortep, slave workers had seized control of the planetary defense systems and were firing on any Zarketh ship that approached. On the trade hub of Solace 3, The local garrison had been overwhelmed by angry mobs. Everywhere the Zarketh Empire was collapsing, but Kate did not celebrate. 10,000 human children were still out there, held on worlds that were becoming war zones. Every day of chaos meant more danger for them. She gathered her commanders for one final push. They would hit all remaining target worlds simultaneously. It was risky spreading their forces thin, but delay was more dangerous. Jack Hayes had been given command of the largest strike force. His target was a fortress world called Drakon, where the Zarketh were holding 4,000 children in a military complex. Intelligence suggested the local commander had threatened to kill the children if humanity attacked. Jack believed the threat was real, which meant they needed to be smart and fast. His fleet arrived at Drakon and immediately faced heavy fire. The Zarketh had turned the entire planet into a fortress after the first rescue operations. Orbital weapons platforms covered every approach. Minefields blocked standard entry vectors. This would not be easy. Jack split his fleet into 3 groups. The first group made a loud, obvious attack on the main defenses, drawing attention and fire. The second group circled around to hit the defenses from behind. The third group, small and fast, would slip through the chaos and land ground forces near the complex holding the children. The plan worked, but the cost was high. The first group took brutal fire from the weapons platforms. Jack watched 3 ships explode, taking their crews with them. But they held position, keeping the enemy focused on them while the other groups maneuvered. The ground team landed 2 kilometers from the complex and moved in on foot. They were led by a young officer named Captain Lee, who had lost his sister in the abductions. His team moved quickly through rough terrain, avoiding patrols. They knew speed was everything. If the Zarketh realized what was happening, they might make good on their threat to kill the children. Inside the complex, Kyle and Lucas Hayes were in a cell with 40 other children. They had been moved here a month ago, transferred from Corvus Prime when the Zarketh realized humanity was targeting rescue operations. The conditions were worse here. Less food, more guards, and constant fear. Kyle had tried to keep spirits up among the younger children, telling them stories and making sure they ate their meager rations. Lucas had become quieter, more withdrawn. Both boys had seen children die in captivity. Both had witnessed cruelty that no child should see. They were not the same kids their father had known. When alarms started blaring, the children huddled together in fear. They had heard alarms before, usually followed by guards coming to take someone away. Kyle held Lucas's hand and tried to stay calm. Whatever was happening, they would face it together. Captain Lee's team reached the complex and blasted through the outer wall with breaching charges. They moved fast, clearing rooms with practiced efficiency. Any Zarketh who raised a weapon was shot. Those who surrendered were zip-tied and left behind. The team had one priority: the children. Lee found the cell block and started breaking down doors. Children poured out, confused and frightened. Lee tried to look calm and reassuring even though his heart was racing. "I am Captain Lee from the Human Defense Force. We are here to take you home. Stay close and follow my team." Kyle saw the captain and felt a surge of hope so strong it hurt. They were being rescued. It was finally happening. He grabbed Lucas and ran toward the soldiers. Around them, other children were doing the same, crying and laughing and hardly believing this was real. But getting in was easier than getting out. The Zarketh commander realized what was happening and sent his full garrison against the rescue team. Lee's soldiers formed a defensive perimeter around the children and started fighting their way back to the landing zone. It was 2 kilometers of running battles through hostile territory with 4,000 terrified kids. Jack Hayes was still in orbit, coordinating the space battle. When he heard his ground team was pinned down, he made a decision. He took his personal fighter and dove through the atmosphere, ignoring fire from surface weapons. He could not leave those children trapped. He would not. Jack's fighter screamed through the sky, targeting Zarketh positions ahead of the ground team. His missiles cleared a path through enemy forces. Other pilots followed his lead, providing air support at dangerous low altitudes. 3 fighters were shot down, but they bought the ground team precious time. Captain Lee got the children to the landing zone. Transport ships descended through heavy fire to pick them up. Kids were loaded as fast as possible, while soldiers held off Zarketh attackers. Lee was hit twice but stayed on his feet until the last child was aboard. Then he collapsed. His team carried him onto the final transport. Jack watched the transports lift off, engines straining under full loads. Zarketh fighters tried to intercept them, but human pilots formed a screen, sacrificing themselves if needed to protect the ships carrying children. Jack shot down 2 enemy fighters himself before his own ship took critical damage. He ejected just before the fighter exploded. Jack fell through the sky in his ejection pod, watching the battle rage above. His pod landed hard in rough terrain. He survived the impact but was now alone on a hostile world. He activated his emergency beacon and found cover in some rocks. All he could do was wait for rescue and hope the children made it off planet safely. On other worlds, similar battles played out. Marcus Webb led a raid on a labor camp on Torval. The children there had been forced to work in chemical refineries, breathing toxic air for months. Some were too sick to walk. Marcus and his team carried them to the ships, refusing to leave anyone behind. Marcus himself carried 3 children on the trip back to the landing zone, his wounded shoulder screaming in pain the whole way. Linda Morrison was with a team hitting a research facility on an ice world called Kresh. What they found there was worse than before. The Zarketh had been conducting genetic experiments, trying to create hybrid species with human adaptability. Most of the test subjects had not survived. Linda walked through labs filled with small bodies and stasis tubes and wanted to burn the entire facility to the ground. But first, they saved the living. 73 children were still alive in that facility. Linda personally disconnected each one from the machines, checking vital signs and doing what she could to stabilize them. She promised each child that they were going home. She did not know if all of them would survive the trip, but she would try. Across 17 worlds, rescue operations succeeded. Not perfectly. Some children died in the fighting. Some were too sick or injured to survive. But humanity refused to give up. They kept coming, kept fighting, kept saving every child they could reach. The Zarketh High Council watched their empire crumble. Rebellions on hundreds of worlds. Their military scattered and defeated. Their secret weapon, the suppression field, destroyed. They had nothing left. The council met in emergency session and made a decision. They would negotiate surrender. Kate Sullivan received the message on the bridge of the Retribution. The Zarketh offered to return all remaining children immediately if humanity would cease hostilities. Kate read the message and felt cold rage. Now they wanted to negotiate? After everything they had done? After all the children who had died? She sent back a single word: no. The Zarketh tried again, offering territory, technology, resources. Kate refused everything. She sent a message to the High Council, audio only, her voice hard as steel. You took our children. You tortured them, worked them like slaves, experimented on them. Some of them died because of you. There is no negotiation. There is no peace. We are coming to your homeworld. We will take our children back, and then we will hold every one of you accountable for what you have done. The human fleet, now reinforced with dozens of allied species, jumped to Throne Prime. The Zarketh homeworld was heavily defended, but the defenders' hearts were not in the fight. They knew they had lost. They knew they deserved what was coming. The battle for Throne Prime lasted 3 days. It was brutal but one-sided. Human ships, driven by righteous fury, tore through Zarketh defenses. Allied species, finally free to fight their oppressors, showed no mercy. The orbital defenses fell. The atmospheric shields collapsed. Human dropships descended on the cities. The Zarketh had kept human children scattered across their capital world, hidden in government buildings, private estates, and secure facilities. Finding all of them required systematic searching. Human soldiers went building by building, accompanied by freed slaves who knew the city's layout. Jack Hayes had been rescued from Drakon and was back with the fleet. He volunteered to lead ground operations on Throne Prime. Kate wanted him to rest after his ordeal, but Jack refused. There were still children down there, and he would not stop until everyone was found. She paused and looked at the glowing pillars. To the children we lost, we say you are not forgotten. Your names will shine here forever. To the children who survived, we say, you are strong and brave, and we will support you for as long as you need. And to the galaxy, we say never again. Never again will we allow the innocent to suffer. This is our promise. This is our legacy. Jack Hayes stood in the garden with Kyle and Lucas. His sons were 14 now, taller and more mature. They still struggled sometimes, still had bad days, but they were healing. They had found purpose in helping other rescued children, sharing their experiences and offering hope. Kyle placed a flower at one of the eternal flame pillars. A girl named Amy who had been in their cell on Corvus Prime had not survived. She had been 8 years old, scared and alone. Kyle made sure her pillar always had fresh flowers. It was his way of remembering her. Marcus Webb visited the garden with Claire. She was 17. The trial lasted 6 months. It was held on a neutral station, newly built to house what was being called the Galactic Assembly. Representatives from every species attended, watching as evidence was presented against the Zarketh leadership. The crimes were documented in painful detail. Centuries of oppression, thousands of species harmed, billions of lives diminished. Kate Sullivan gave the opening statement. She stood before the gathered species and told them what had happened to humanity's children. She showed images and played recordings. The galaxy watched children in labor camps. They heard testimonies from kids who had been experimented on. They saw the bodies of those who did not survive. There was no way to watch this evidence and feel anything but horror. The Zarketh Council members defended themselves by claiming they followed ancient galactic law. Their lawyers argued that every species in the chamber had benefited from Zarketh stability. Yes, some species were suppressed, but that prevented wars and chaos. Yes, some individuals suffered, but it was for the greater good of galactic order. Linda Morrison took the stand and presented her evidence about the suppression field. She showed how the Zarketh had deliberately stunted the development of other species to maintain control. She demonstrated how the technology worked and explained that every species in the room had been affected except humanity. The revelation caused outrage in the chamber. Species who thought they had freely chosen to submit to Zarketh rule now understood they had been manipulated. The trial concluded with guilty verdicts for all members of the High Council. The sentences varied. Some received life imprisonment. The worst offenders, those directly responsible for the children's suffering, were sentenced to execution. The Zarketh's power was broken completely. Their homeworld was placed under joint governance by the new Galactic Assembly. Their military was disbanded. Their technology was shared with all species. But justice for the Zarketh leadership was only one part of the healing process. The children needed help too. Jack Hayes brought Kyle and Lucas home to Earth. Their house looked exactly as they had left it 2 years ago. Jack had kept everything the same, hoping they would return. The boys walked through familiar rooms like strangers in a foreign land. So much had changed inside them that the house felt like a museum of a life they used to live. Kyle had nightmares every night. He would wake up screaming, thinking he was back in the cell. Jack would sit with him until he calmed down, sometimes talking, sometimes just being present. Lucas barely talked at all anymore. He went through the motions of normal life, but his eyes were distant. He was there physically, but not emotionally. Jack enrolled them in therapy. The therapist specialized in trauma recovery. She explained that healing would take time. The boys had experienced things no child should experience. They needed patience and support. Jack promised to give them whatever time they needed. Slowly, progress came. Kyle started having fewer nightmares. Lucas began to talk more, sharing memories of captivity that he had kept locked inside. Both boys joined support groups with other rescued children. Sharing their experiences with people who understood helped more than anything else. Marcus Webb faced similar challenges with Claire. She had changed from the happy 12-year-old he remembered into a quiet, wary teenager. The labor camp had taught her not to trust anyone, not to show weakness, not to hope for better. Those were hard lessons to unlearn. Marcus took a leave from the military to focus on being her father. They started small, rebuilding their relationship piece by piece. They cooked meals together. They watched movies. They went for walks. Marcus never pushed her to talk, but he was always available when she wanted to. One day, 6 months after coming home, Claire broke down crying while they were washing dishes. Marcus held her while she sobbed. She talked about the mine, about being scared every day, about watching other children die. Marcus listened and told her she was safe now. She was home. He would never let anyone hurt her again. "I know, Dad," Claire said quietly, "but sometimes I still feel like I am back there. Like this is a dream and I will wake up in the mine." Marcus understood. He had similar feelings sometimes, memories of the war that felt more real than the peaceful present. "It gets better," he told her. "It takes time, but it gets better. I promise." Linda Morrison threw herself into work, which was her way of coping. She established the Institute for Galactic Ethics, an organization dedicated to studying what had happened and ensuring it never happened again. The Institute collected testimonies from every species that had suffered under Zarketh rule. They documented the crimes in exhaustive detail. The result was a massive database that served as a reminder and a warning. Linda also worked with medical teams treating the most severely affected children. Some had physical damage from experiments or abuse. Others had psychological trauma so deep they might never fully recover. Linda visited them regularly, bringing gifts and spending time with them. She remembered each child's name and story. It was her way of making amends for the role she had played, however unknowingly, in enabling the Zarketh. Kate Sullivan stepped down from military command, but took a leadership role in the Galactic Assembly. Her granddaughter Emma was recovering slowly. The girl had been kept in a breeding analysis facility, subjected to invasive procedures. She had physical scars and emotional ones, but she was tough like her grandmother. She was determined to heal and move forward. Emma told Kate she wanted to work for the Assembly when she grew up. She wanted to make sure no other children suffered like she had. Kate supported her decision. The galaxy needed people who had experienced darkness and chosen to bring light. The Galactic Assembly created new laws. The first and most important was the Protection of Youth Act. It declared that children of all species were protected beings. They could not be taken from their families, used for labor, or subjected to experimentation. Any species that violated this law would face severe consequences. The entire galaxy voted in favor. Even former Zarketh allies supported it. Other laws followed. Slavery was banned across all Assembly territory. The suppression technology was outlawed and all remaining stations were destroyed. Species were given access to technology that had been kept from them for centuries. The galaxy began to change in fundamental ways. Not all Zarketh were punished. Many had opposed their government's actions or helped during the war. These individuals were allowed to remain free. Young Zarketh, horrified by what their elders had done, worked to make amends. They joined relief organizations, helped rebuild damaged worlds, and served as ambassadors for a new way of thinking. One young Zarketh named Salvin came to Earth to apologize directly to human families. He visited Jack Hayes and his sons. Kyle and Lucas were frightened at first, seeing someone who looked like their captors, but Salvin spoke with genuine remorse. He explained that he had been too young to stop what happened, but he would spend his life trying to make things right. Kyle listened and eventually nodded. "You are not them," he said quietly. "You chose to be different. That matters." Salvin became a regular visitor, helping with therapy programs and sharing Zarketh perspectives on healing. His presence helped some children understand that not all Zarketh were evil. People could choose to do better, even after terrible wrongs. 5 years after the war, a memorial was built on Earth in Geneva. The Garden of Stars covered 10 acres of land. At its center stood 40,000 crystal pillars arranged in a spiral pattern. Each pillar was engraved with a child's name. 38,734 pillars glowed with warm light, representing those who came home. 1,266 burned with eternal flames, representing those who did not survive. The dedication ceremony drew people from across the galaxy. Human families stood beside Torvan workers, freed slaves from dozens of species, and even reformed Zarketh. They came to remember and to honor the children who had suffered. Kate Sullivan gave a speech at the ceremony. She stood before the memorial, her voice strong despite her age. "We built this garden to remember what was taken from us, but also to remind us what we learned. We learned that some things are worth any sacrifice. We learned that children are precious beyond measure. We learned that the strong have a duty to protect the weak, not exploit them. And we learned that when humanity is united by love and purpose, there is nothing we cannot accomplish."